Hi folks, this is Tony for A Minute To Midnite.com, and in this video I want to cover a few different aspects of what's going on at the moment that I see as concerning, and 2021 has definitely started off as a year of more craziness to go along with 2020. Before I do start though, I want to remind people that A Minute To Midnight is run 100% by donations, and I don't normally like to ask this, but I have to say that donations in recent weeks have fallen away to almost nothing, and it's pretty concerning. Can't really keep this running unless people help us out. It's basically my only income, and we really do appreciate it when people do support through donating, and you can do that at aminutetomidnite.com. So I'll leave it at that, but if you're able to help, that'd be great. Okay, so now censorship has been on the increase for quite some time, as we know, and it's affected A Minute To Midnight with our videos in the past quite a lot. But we're seeing it now ramping up over a lot of platforms. I'm not just talking about A Minute To Midnight, but I will cover censorship and what's going on in this video. And the mainstream media, even in New Zealand, definitely by and large has a leftist sort of liberal leaning, and often with little objectivity, and that's seen very clearly in so many outlets, even like stuff.co.nz amongst other things. And of course, you know, you've got the Washington Post owned by Jeff Bezos and all kinds of others. You look at this and you see a definite kind of liberal leaning.
He's called the QAnon man, and prosecutors in his case first alleged he and others were bent on hurting lawmakers. An alleged note left in the Senate at Mike Pence's desk says it's only a matter of time. Justice is coming. But the Justice Department now says there isn't hard evidence yet of any planned capture and kill plot. The House Speaker wants a sweeping inquiry.
There is strong interest in the Congress in a 9/11 type commission.
Pelosi described her disgust at hate-filled rioters, like this man shown with his odious T-shirt.
To see this punk with that shirt on and his anti-Semitism that he has bragged about, to be part of a white supremacist raid on this Capitol.
As the horror of January 6th continues to shake the Capitol, D.C. Metro Police share chilling detail.
I remember guys were stripping me of my gear, and then some guys started getting a hold of my gun, and they were screaming out, kill him with his own gun.
Officer Daniel Hodges was caught in a door in a vice-like squeeze.
There was a guy ripping my mask off, and he was able to rip away my baton and beat me with it, and he was practically foaming at the mouth. So just these people were true believers in the worst way.
I've said on this channel though many times that QAnon has had a dangerous cult-like following, and I believe it is a psyop, a deliberate psyop, and always has been. And now we have seen people, storm the Capitol, and people like that horned QAnon shaman and others going to crazy excess in the Capitol a little while back, as we all know. And they're rightly being branded as a danger, those type of people. And like I say, I think QAnon is actually a dangerous cult. But the media is all over them and slamming them, and rightly so. But where was the media outrage at the rioting of the BLM and Antifa protests in 2020 and the damage that was done around America then, and the pulling down of statues and all of those things? And a lot of the politicians were in favour of it and were not at all decrying it. So where was the outrage there, not to lessen what's going on now? Half the USA believes that the election was stolen from Trump, and the other half believe that Trump was trying to steal the election. Many Christians, under the guidance of dubious self-appointed NAR prophets who proclaimed that Trump was God's anointed, and that didn't matter how badly Trump himself may have behaved, and that with it promises that he would have 2 terms in office, many of them. Well, where are those supposed prophetic voices in terms of accountability for their words now? And while, on the other hand, there have been other people proclaiming that Donald Trump is the Antichrist. Well, he can't be both, and he most likely is neither. The QAnon crowd and many Dominionists have been so convinced of Trump that they would follow the piper over the cliff. On the other hand, those that hate Trump, the Antifa and the radical left, etc., will stop at nothing to try and paint Christians and conservatives as a whole as dangerous right-wing nut jobs who supported a rogue and dangerous president. It's all a setup. It's theatre with political actors, and so few people seem to be able to stand back and see this is all designed as a perfect Hegelian dialectic scenario engineered to cause chaos and to destroy the current system of government and to basically marginalise anyone that disagrees with the liberal leftist government that is becoming not just in America but basically sweeping the globe. The system as we know it is crumbling, and meanwhile the Great Reset is being implemented slowly but surely. It's auto-ab-chaos, create the chaos and then bring in the order, a world order ultimately. So now I just want to look at some of the aspects of the censorship. This is from the Washington Standard. Unchecked Power, warning after Trump's permanent suspension from social media. The ACLU, that's American Civil Liberties Union, is warning the public of big tech's unchecked power in the aftermath of President Donald Trump's permanent suspension from social media. Kate Ruane, a senior legislative counsellor at the ACLU, said in a statement that Twitter's decision to suspend Trump from social media sets a precedent for tech companies to silence voices. Censorship is running rampant right now, and few seem to notice or even give a damn. The ACLU first took issue with Trump's usage of social media outlets to question the results of the November 3rd election and his allegations of voter fraud. We understand the desire to permanently suspend him now, but it should concern everyone when companies like Facebook and Twitter wield the unchecked power to remove people from platforms that have become indispensable for the speech of billions, especially when political realities make those decisions easier. So really, it doesn't matter whether you support Trump or not. The question here is, do you support the censorship of people like Trump? Because it won't stay there at just Trump, as we're already seeing. It affects all of us that are have a different point of view than what the big tech companies want you to be putting out there, which is by and large leftist-leaning liberalism. In case in point, here's an article in Fox News. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez suggestion of commission to rein in media slammed as wholly un-American. Media watchdogs are shocked and appalled that Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said that Congress is looking into media literacy initiatives, including a commission to help rein in misinformation in the wake of last week's deadly breach of the US Capitol, and one critic slammed AOC's suggestion as wholly un-American. Let's unpack this proposal. She wants basically to establish a ministry of truth. We've all read 1984, and to determine what is truth and what is not. So who sits on this committee exactly? Eric Swalwell, Adam Schiff? Because they seem to have some challenges when it comes to telling the truth. Joe Concha is a Hill media columnist, said. How does Mrs. Ocasio-Cortez define truth exactly? We need only to point to our media fact-checkers, journalists with political and ideological biases who have regularly and arbitrarily labelled completely debatable contentions as falsehoods while either ignoring or justifying scores of unsettled contentions. Are these the arbiters of fact who will be manning the government commission appointed by these storied truth-tellers in Congress? It's just creepy, not to mention wholly un-American, for an elected official to advocate the state as adjudicator of veracity of our political speech. It's also crassly hypocritical. If anyone could use a truth commission, it's Congress, he concluded, he being David Harsanyi, who penned a New York Post opinion piece titled AOC and Other Progressives Have a New Goal, Silence the Press. And here's another concerning prospect to go with it. The IMF, that's the International Monetary Fund, calls for credit score to be tied to internet search history. In a blog post courtesy of the International Monetary Fund, IMF researchers Arnold Boot, Peter Hoffman and Luc Levine and Lev Ratnovsky called for internet search history to be tied to credit score. Presenting their findings from a paper, they wrote, the researchers argued that by using non-financial data, specifically the history of online searches and purchases, we can solve the problem of certain kinds of people not having enough hard data, income, employment, time, assets and debts available. The authors of this piece claim that the move is a necessary innovation in order to compete with the rise of corporate cryptocurrencies such as the one in development by Facebook, who hope to launch it next year. While Facebook is a monopoly that is engaged in political censorship, their power pales in comparison to that of the IMF. The International Monetary Fund is a veritable superpower with ties to the World Bank, and they oversee the entire global economy. It should go without saying that giving this organisation the power to track everyone's search history can lead to some dark ramifications. With private banks, notably JP Morgan and Chase Bank, already kicking conservatives off their services, one can only imagine how much this would escalate with the IMF tracking everyone's search history. While there has been bipartisan opposition to the Chinese social credit system in Congress, the distinctions between that system and what the IMF is pushing remains ill-defined. Facebook locks out Ron Paul following column criticising big tech censorship, and then Facebook claims it was an error. However, it was done. On Monday, Facebook blocked former presidential candidate Ron Paul from his own page. The move came hours after the longtime congressman and libertarian hero shared an article he wrote criticising Twitter and Facebook for banning President Donald Trump from their platforms. So that's one example of how crazy this whole censorship is. And as another example of how crazy this censorship is, it actually even goes beyond just media censorship. Forbes op-ed warns companies about hiring fabulists from Trump administration. Cancelling anyone who is associated with President Trump is not going to unite the country, Independent Women's Forum analyst Kelsey Bowler said on Tuesday. This is just the latest example of cancel culture and the great purge that we're seeing come from the left and never Trump Republicans, Bowler told Fox and Friends. Bowler said that Biden was elected to the president on the idea of bringing unity and a sense of normalcy to this country. However, the dangerous cancel culture will prevent that from happening. This dangerous cancel culture, which wants to ban any American who had the audacity to support President Trump or work in his administration from being able to do something as basic as having a new job, she said. Bowler reacted to Forbes' warning companies not to hire officials associated with Trump in a recent op-ed. Again, you can see where this is leading. It is a purge. It's typical of the sort of things that communist governments have done in the past, and it should be a warning to folks as to where things appear to be heading. And Facebook criticised by Dems liberal watchdog for skirting Capitol riot blame. The social media platform has been trying to scrub far-right activist content from its site, but several Democrats and a liberal watchdog group slammed Facebook for doing too little, too late to crack down on pro-Trump radical groups organising violence in Washington, even as the tech giant tried to shift blame over the Capitol riot to Parlor and other platforms popular with conservatives. Facebook Chief Operating Officer Sheryl Sandberg said at the Reuters Next conference Monday that Facebook took down QAnon, Proud Boys, Stop the Steal, and anything that was talking about possible violence last week. And while I've said many times that I believe QAnon is a psyop, and I certainly don't support any of the extreme right-wing groups, and I'm not sorry to see them gone really, but the thing is, what I do feel concerned about is the censorship of the supposed right-wing and conservatives, whereas I don't see the same level of censorship being against the left-wing extremists and the radicals on that side. So it's very unbalanced in what is happening. Another article on Fox News says liberals ostracizing, ridiculing conservatives with frequent rhetoric comparing them to Hitler and terrorists. The left doesn't want the nation to heal. What they want are conservatives to be brought to heel. They think the way forward isn't about bringing people together, but instead ostracizing, ridiculing, and destroying anyone who doesn't agree with them, conservative strategist Chris Barron told Fox News. This didn't start recently. It began with Hillary's deplorable comments, and now that the election is over, the left believes they have a green light to do whatever it takes to purge conservatives, Barron continued. I'm sure most of you by now have heard about Parlor, the alternative to Twitter, which was banned from a whole lot of places on the internet recently. Apple's Cook. Parlor can return if it gets moderation together. Apple CEO Tim Cook claims social media platform Parlor and its mobile application could return to Apple's virtual store if it gets its moderation together. Parlor, seen by many as a conservative alternative to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook and others, has been practically shut down by several large technology companies such as Apple, which claims its app was used to incite violence during last week's protests at the US Capitol. Apple and Google removed the app from its App Store, and Amazon has denied the company use of its servers, a move which made Parler unavailable to its millions of subscribers. We looked at the incitement to violence that was on there, Cook said, and we don't consider that free speech and incitement to violence has intersection. We've only suspended them, so if they get their moderation together, they will be back on there. Some have accused Apple, along with Google and Amazon, as being hypocrites, since similar actions weren't taken against Twitter, Facebook or Instagram for allowing groups to use their platform to organise during riots that occurred over the summer. And of course that's the Black Lives Matter riots and the defund the police riots and the tearing down of statues, etc. Those left-wing type riots were not stopped by any of these platforms, but it does appear a different standard applies when it's right wings. Of course, I don't believe really in left and right wing as such, because I think it's all Hegelian dialectic and the same people largely control the left and the right, and they're trying to get everyone to where they want it to be, into a socialist New World Order system. Parler's CEO John Matz and his family are forced into hiding over death threats and security breaches. The social media app favoured by conservatives launched an antitrust law against Amazon, and a new court filing on Friday from the Parler legal team revealed its CEO John Matz and his family are now in hiding over death threats and security breaches they've faced. Matz himself, as the CEO of the company AWS continues to vilify, has had to leave his home and go into hiding with his family after receiving death threats and invasive personal security breaches, the filing continued. Earlier this week, Matz told Fox News about the various threats he has received and the measures he would take to protect his family. There's a group called UG Nazi that's targeting me, Matz said. Noting the controversial hacker group has released many of his passwords and personal information on the internet. They published my street address. They threatened to come through my front door. So this is kind of the left wing, how they target people that they don't like. So as an example, there are probably left wing people, radicals that are targeting conservatives, but do you hear the Democrats decrying them? I don't think so. Washington Post, owned by Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos, endorses the shutdown of Parler. In a piece headlined, "Parler deserved to be taken down. We still need new rules for the internet," the Post describes the app as a fringe, laissez-faire social media site that potentially gave President Trump another platform following his permanent ban on Twitter. and suspensions elsewhere. But now even Parlor is no longer an option for the president since Apple and Google removed the app from its stores and Amazon Web Services essentially pulled the plug on the entire program. I just want to read a small section from an article at Global Research titled "You Are Surrounded by Propaganda, the Invisible Government." The Overton window. Alternative views are not discussed. The repetition of some points of view is so widespread that these perspectives become the accepted norm, so individuals engage in self-censorship, where they become reluctant to express dissenting views, afraid that they will be considered ridiculous by their friends and colleagues. This becomes reinforcing so that the acceptable range of views becomes very narrow. This is known as the Overton window. Alternative views are essentially shut down. This desire to conform with others around us is a very powerful psychological trait. Understanding the extent of propaganda in Britain and the US is the key to understanding how political and corporate criminals have been able to get away with their activities for so long. The last piece I want to read is an excerpt from an article written by Michael Snyder at the Economic Collapse blog. Without freedom of speech, what is going to happen to America? The big tech companies don't want diversity, they don't want competition, and they don't want dissent. What they want is complete and total domination. Cancel culture is not good for our society. If everyone with viewpoints that are not politically correct is eventually cancelled, we will have a society that looks a whole lot like communist China. And I suppose that is precisely what a lot of people out there truly want. Ironically, many of those that are doing the censoring have the most offensive and the most dangerous viewpoints of all. Needless to say, if we stay on the path that we are currently on, there is no future for America. Without free speech, the system of government that our founders established simply won't work. What is the point of even having elections if we can only express one point of view? In China, no dissent is allowed and one political party runs everything on a permanent basis. America appears to be heading in the same direction, and there are millions of people in this country that are actually quite thrilled that this is happening. And meanwhile, in just a few days' time, you'll have the inauguration of a new president with 25,000 National Guard troops deployed to the Capitol as Biden inauguration looms. The number of troops deployed in DC is more than 3 times those in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. Folks, it's really time to wake up and realise that there are no answers in the political system. You're not going to find freedom, you're not going to find answers through politicians, and it's time that Christians stopped equating a political party with Christianity and get our eyes on the Lord Jesus, and really that is where our only hope lies. That's it for this update. Don't forget, as I mentioned earlier, if you're able to donate to help keep A Minute to Midnight running, that would be greatly appreciated. You can do that at aminutetomidnite.com, and you will also find all of our shows and videos there on aminutetomidnite.com, completely separate to our other platforms like YouTube and iTunes. That's it then, and hopefully we'll be back with another video in a few days' time. Meanwhile, God bless and have a great week.